I guess we waited for some minutes already, and so we can kick off the conversation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is listening to us, or perhaps will be streaming live later on, wherever you are. I mean, we're speaking to a very large, diverse audience, so I don't expect that we are all in the same time zone. But Yes, so it's a hi from my end. So thank you so much for joining in. My name is Kehinde Kayode. I'm the director of the Girls for Leadership Initiative, and I'm so excited to have Akhil with us today, speaking to the exciting topic: women leadership in 2023. So Akhil, how you doing? Yes.
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kenny, for having me here.
Okay, it's my pleasure as well, and thank you for honoring our invitation. So on our agenda, we have quite a lot of exciting things to look into and to talk about. But before then, I did like to quickly show you this video. I mean, it's from the stable of the Girls for Leadership Initiative. So I hope everyone enjoys it. Yeah. I hope everyone enjoys. This is just about 5 minutes long. So let's see how that goes. Okay. That was like a 5 minutes long video. Just talking about what we do at Girls for Leadership Initiative. I mean, it's about 2 years and some months now that we kick off this mandate to address gender inequality in Nigeria and to also talk about, gender inequality as it is happening in other parts of the world. And that's why we're having this conversation. So permit me to just reiterate and give you a little insight to what we do and what we are all about. I know that video must have been so very explanatory enough. Yes, because it actually touched light our journey in 2021 and our journey in 2022, and we're looking forward to our journey in 2023 as well. So, Girls for Leadership Initiative is a non governmental organization in Nigeria. We are on the mission to address gender inequality, most particularly by empowering women and girls with leadership skills so we can decrease the gap that is existing in terms of representation in governance, in politics, in leadership position across board, be it in private institutions and etc. So that's what we are all about, and our vision and our mission is very simple. I mean, we are looking forward to seeing in Nigeria that provides an environment where women can thrive, where there is no hindrances for them to, be who they want to be and what they can achieve. And our mission is to equip, the generation of female leaders. So that's basically what we are all about. And we've done a lot of programs, projects, and activities around our thematic area. And this is also part of it, sensitization, talking about, issues relating to the gender gap, particularly in the leadership area. So, enough of that. Let's deep dive into the conversation of today. Um, yes, we have Akhil. Akhil is the director for the Center for the Center for Gender and Politics. Yeah, I hope I'm not mistaken. Akhil.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, absolutely. So I'm going to give the floor to Akhil to introduce himself as well as the Center for Gender and Politics in India. So Akhil, the floor is yours. Let's get to know you.
Thanks, Kenny, again for having me today. It's my pleasure to interact with the audience in Nigeria and beyond. Like Kenny mentioned, I am the co founder and director of CGAP, Center for Gender and Politics. Our focus area is in the context of South Asia. We are a registered non-profit think tank in India. I personally am very passionate about building responsible politics and gender equal society. Education wise, I am an engineer turned liberal arts graduate. I worked with state governments, local governments in India for about 4 years on large scale projects, implementation, and reforms. Um, about CGAP briefly, we are a think tank that contributes to high quality scholarship at the intersection of gender, electoral politics, and South Asia. We are also becoming a platform for researchers, policy leaders, and public to engage in positive discourse on furthering gender diversity and inclusion in political spaces in the context of South Asia. We are led by very passionate volunteers. We worked with over 100 volunteers from across South Asia in the last 3 years, and I'm proud to see a lot of our volunteers continuing their contributions towards the cause, emerging as leaders in the space. We also have a lot of men who have been volunteering with us, bringing in the men's allyship into improving gender equity and equality in the political spaces of South Asia. I just pause here. Uh, Thank you.
Wow, that's like a very impressive introduction. Thank you so much, Akil, and thank you for the work that you do. I mean, I love to see men in this space because I know there are quite very few men that are playing in the domain. But as much as possible, we like love to see men play big in this domain, and that's why I'm really fascinated about what you do at the Center for Gender and Politics. Kudos. And one of those other details that sort of fascinates me about your introduction is you having a background in a core science field, but then you have passion for this, and then you went all the way to, make yourself relevant, your skills relevant in decreasing the inequality that exists in women. For women in leadership across board, particularly when it comes to Southeast Asia. Thank you so very much, Akil. Okay, now that we know about Akil, we know about his work at Center for Gender and Politics. We know that we're talking with an expert in this area. He's done his research. I mean, they are like the think tank when it comes to research and policies around, bridging the gap that exists in having more women in political positions, in having women in governance, and in having women in leadership positions across board. So now that we've already established the fact, I think we need to um, go into the discussion of the day, women leadership in 2023. I mean, this is a very huge topic because it's like, oh, where do we start from? Are we talking about women leadership in politics? Are we talking about women leadership in governance? Are we talking about women leadership in, the non-profit sector, in other for profit sectors? It's a very large topic, but generally we're looking at women in leadership. But mind you, the concentration of this conversation may want to swipe to women in politics because I know a lot of things shape, other sectors from that particular angle. When you have parity in representation, it's therefore reflects in other sectors across board. So our concentration may most likely fall within that area. Yeah, so I'm just super excited about this, and I can't wait to see and to know like a lot from Akil's analysis. But just to start with, we're looking at women leadership across board on a global spectrum. So we're not just limited from my own perspective as a Nigerian or as Girls for Leadership playing in the Nigerian domain, or as Akil playing in the Indian domain or the South Asian domain. We're looking at these across board. I need to start with even before we go into deep and deep analysis of uh, specific locations, continents, or countries. I have like an update from, or let's say, a report according to the World Economic Forum in 2020, the Global Gender Report. It says that women's leadership across board, from the professional technical role, is steadily increasing from 2017 to 2022. So there's been like a steady increase. And according to their reports, there's about 42.7% parity. So it's looking like it has been before has been, disheartening, if I put it that way. But right now, it's, even if we are still very much way behind, it's still like a bit of like an improvement. And just to also give us a little background before I give space for obviously our guest here today to do justice. There is also the report according to the UN Women, that there has been positive increase from 1995 until date in terms of women representation as leaders in the government sector. So what we have as at 1995 was just about 11%, but until this, there has been like a substantial increase. However, the percentage increase has just been growing by 0.5% on an annual basis. So this gives us like worry that we may not close the parity gap come 2060 or thereabout. So it's like, so we have several decades to come to even talk about parity in terms of leadership across board. So on this basis, I'm going to give the floor to our guest speaker, who is like uh, very knowledgeable in this area with research, with facts, with everything come what to give us like his analysis on this. So what's your take on it globally? What do you think? How have we performed fighting against gender inequality, particularly when it comes to leadership opportunity for women across board?
Yeah, thanks, Kenny, for mentioning those facts as well. I'd like to add a few more factual numbers and figures to it, but in a bit. But overall, you know, like you mentioned, there is progress. Like if we look at 10 years period, 20 years period, but year after the year, it's never linear progress, right? Um, it's not always in the uptrend if we look year by year, but in the long term it has seen a increase from 11% in 1995 to 26% women in parliament globally. um, so last year we saw many fuss, and like in the US as well, there have been record number of governors getting elected, women mayors getting elected. We have seen new countries getting their first women heads of states, but we also had Ukraine, we also had Afghanistan. So it's never really a linear progress year after the year, but there has been a steady increase. I refer to some of the facts from UN Women itself. If we talk about women as ministers and prime ministers, right, there's only 21% of 21% women globally serving as government ministers across the world, and there are only 28 countries where women are serving as heads of states or heads of governments. And even within this ministries, if we closely analyze as per UN women's analysis, right, five most commonly held positions by women ministers are family and children welfare, social affairs, environmental and energy affairs, employment and labor and vocational training, and fifth being women empowerment and gender equality ministries. So it's there is, like there is cultural reasons behind it as to why women are being given cabinet positions or ministerial positions only for supposedly soft ministries, but we never we rarely see women in the positions of like conventionally speaking, in the positions of defense ministry, in the positions of finance ministry, ministries like that, which hold a lot of influence within the country and you know across countries as well. So that's with respect to women. Speaking about women as ministers, as heads of states, if we look at women in parliament, we've already discussed how the percentage has grown from 11% in 1995 to 26% today as of September 2022. But it is also important to note that there are only five countries which have more than 50% women in its parliaments, which include Rwanda, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, UAE, and there are about 27 more countries which surpassed 40%, and and these are the countries that are bringing up the overall percentage of 26 that we see today. But so going by the math of averages, majority of countries are well behind 26%, that's global average when it comes to women in national parliaments, right? It's also important to note and analyze women in local governments, because that's where we see a lot of action towards gender equality in political spaces happening. There is a global average of 35% women serving in local bodies, local governments, at village level, at municipal level, city corporations level. If we look at just India, there are I think 1.4 million women serving at the village level and city level. So it's a huge number, and partly this success is attributed to the quota system introduced by Indian government, but it's also largely getting played in other South Asian countries. Nepal has a quota for women in local governments. Asia itself is ranked higher when it comes to percentage of women serving in local governments. Again, uh, if we delve into reasons as to why there are more women at the local level but not at the national level or at heads of state level, there could be there are cultural reasons as well as historical reasons um, which play out to justify these numbers. We can talk about them in a bit as we go along.
Thank you so much, Akil. That's a very brilliant analysis there, and I love the angle that you took the conversation to. So we're not just concentrated on the higher level of representation. We're looking at the grassroots level where a lot of decisions are supposed to be taking place. I mean, it has to be like a bottom up approach and not just like an up bottom approach. That's one of those things that's really intrigued me in your submission. And I love the fact that you gave us an analysis of those countries that are doing pretty much well in terms of representation. So one of the very first of them is Rwanda. And contrary to a lot of submission about the African culture, the African tradition, and the patriarchal system that has lingered on until date, Rwanda has been able to stand out from many to achieve over 50%. They have about 60, I think 63 thereabout percentage of women representation in parliament, which is like amazing to know. And my last visit to Rwanda, obviously, I could tell that this is a country that is working. I mean, in terms of even the ambience, I could really feel that Rwanda is improving. Rwanda is working. And this, you can correlate it with the percentage of representation in terms of women in parliament. So why are other countries not embracing this? Going back to the 1995 Belgium Declaration for 35% affirmative position for women, we have a lot of countries that have not reached the 20% benchmark, talk little of 30%. And my country, my home country, Nigeria, is unfortunately part of these countries which is even yet to reach that benchmark. We're still about 7.5% representation, which is pretty very poor. I mean, from our last election in 2019, we have just 3.6% representation of women at the lower house. And then we have 7.3% of women representation at the upper house. So this is very disheartening with our population as the most populated African country. If we're unable to demonstrate this in terms of representation, then what are we picturing to other African countries? But I'm thankful that Rwanda has been able to break that myth about African countries being able to, achieve parity in terms of representation. And the question is, what is Rwanda doing right? You know, how did
Yeah.
Rwanda get there? So a
Yeah.
little stuff of their policy or their process shows that they have a quota system in place, which obviously should be like a way for every other countries to sort of embrace representation. Or what's your take on it, Akil?
Yes, so definitely in Rwanda and a lot of other countries globally, quotas are clearly working, at least in terms of improving numbers, getting those seats at the table, right? If I can give reference from India, India's gram panchayats, which are basically village bodies, has about 40% women in its governance, playing very crucial role in terms of village development. And there has been studies done to understand the impact of quota systems on this. The likes of Esther Duflo have studied how quotas in India's local governance are positively playing out in terms of village development, right? In compared to those villages where there is no quota. So even in Netherlands, there was a study done linking the quota in municipal councils to the impact on childcare facilities. So there is that evidence clearly coming out, which we have seen that quotas are clearly working. Apart from quotas, I also see that there are a couple of other things which have worked for Rwanda and a lot of other countries which are doing far better than the majority globally, which are I think in my opinion the foremost being solidarity, which is playing out really big. There are women's political caucuses. I think even in Rwanda and a lot of African countries, it's a lot more popular in Western countries, but there are also references to it in South Asian countries. So we have women's parliamentary caucuses very actively working in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bhutan, where women parliamentarians across political party lines come together and influence the institution to take up measures to push for gender equality in the parliament, in the country, in the society, right? So I think, given that a lot of countries are based on political party systems, this solidarity of women leaders coming together beyond their political party lines, I think that is also clearly working out in many countries in terms of putting that influence on at the highest level of policy making. The third thing, apart from quotas and solidarity, I would like to highlight is the policy level push to get to improve representation for women in politics. So it when it becomes a big political agenda for the country itself, in some ways, brand building for those countries, then again we see a lot of positive impact playing out. For example, take Iceland. It pitches itself as gender equality paradise. So gender equality is very much at the heart of policy making, their policy positioning, political agenda. So once you have that integrated into your agendas at the highest level, then institutionally it becomes easy and it works out really well.
So, if I get you correctly, Akil, what you're trying to say in short is that a lot of countries who have not like improved much with gender parities because they do not um, understand the importance of gender equality, and they do not have it as part of their structural or policy agenda, like something they need to pursue to like make them achieve some developmental goals. Is that what you are saying in short?
Yes, that is definitely the main point when it comes to understanding institutional push towards gender equality. But a lot of countries, from cultures where I come from, also there are cultural reasons like patriarchy and societal norms around women coming out in public and participating in politics, right? So like that plays out in several cultures globally, which is one of the main reasons as well. Apart from that, I also think issues such as violence against women, um, the, like legal lack of legal guarantees for women to participate in political processes, political party work. We have done a study understanding legal guarantees around women's position as cadre or party workers in India. I can talk about it. Culturally, also there is this narrative of describing women, especially from South Asia. I can't speak for Africa. Maybe you can pitch in. The women leaders are always being looked at as victims, not as leaders. They are always victims of challenges in developing countries, um, right? But they're never seen as leaders unless the narrative shifts to a positive narrative where we describe women as leaders but not victims. Then we perceive women as role models. It will inspire a lot of younger generation of girls and boys who want to venture into politics. I think, apart, I mean, these are more societal and cultural reasons apart from just having it on political agendas to push institutional change.
Absolutely. I can't agree less to what you had said. I mean, victimization of women who are even in politics is sort of like making other women not to be interested in, in pursuing, careers in politics, taking leadership roles, and etc. And I often get the question, from some people who I want to like probably say it's part of being ignorant about the issues. They're always like, "Oh, women are not pushing themselves forward, and that's why they're not given the opportunity." And my reference or my response rather is usually like, there's been lingering existing hindrances or sort of like causes that are not making these women interested in politics, right? So social cultural context, the institutional context, the victimization context and exit areas, the lack of support, and even sometimes economic limitations because of obvious reasons that we have inequality in the labor force. Even sometimes there are in many countries we still have issues of unequal pay. These are
Mhm.
issues that are still on the forefront. So when we're having causes like factors surrounding all of these issues, obviously you would the results would be that you would have women who are not interested in pursuing, a leadership position, even when they have the skills, they have the experience, they have the expertise, they have everything to be leaders, but they're just not, moved to take the step
Yeah.
forward. So I really do agree with you. Um, so okay, let's take the discussion a bit further to more on the continent and region basis. So I know we've been able to touch base on this quite briefly, but then I just want to understand like continent range basis. How do you think women leadership is like coming up, particularly if we're looking at 2023 in prospects, right? What are you seeing? Is Europe going to be doing better than Latin America? What's your expectation for Asia? What's your expectation for African countries?
Right. Obviously, I mean, there are a lot of factors that will influence the trends on women's representation and leadership. Like I was just mentioning, you have Latin America and even South Asia or some African countries improving, registering a tremendous improvement on one hand, but on the other hand, you keep having Afghanistan or Ukraine cases such as those, which might hinder the progress that is already made, right? I mean, if we just look at charts and graphs, it shows that representation increased over time. I was just looking at a report from Interparliamentary Union, and from 2021 to 2022, um, the regions of both North America and South America and European Union, they have been able to register the highest increase as compared to other regions. Um, but all of these indices are also biased in some way or the other, right? When we look at global gender gap report by World Economic Forum, it only can talk about four indicators which are common across all 150 countries it tracks. And they are women in parliament, women in cabinet, women as number of years women have been head of state and head of government, right? So apart from this, there is not enough data available um, in large number of countries to even go deeper and understand what's playing out. For example, I was mentioning India's case, where India has 1.4 million women in its village level governance, but World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap report does not have that parameter, because India might measure that number at village level, but Sri Lanka might not have the accurate number, or another country might not measure that number at all. So if we look at data, like from a research point of view, there is a lot of nuances that we miss out in terms of measuring and truly understanding how trends are playing out. But I am happy with the fact that, like, 2022 to 2023, we are seeing more emphasis on women's leadership globally, right? There's Generation Equality Forum, which was convened by UN Women very recently, and many regional forums are actively discussing this topic. So I hope in 2023 this increases focus further and motivate many more women to join leadership positions. I'm also happy to see that, in the last two to 3 years, women have gained lot. I mean, it's more visible. They're more visible and have lot of power as political actors, as voters. In India, women's vote percentage is almost um, equal to or more than that of men in several states, right? So they hold a lot of power now as voters, as someone, as a group who decides who should come to power, who should become that leader, right? So in Pakistan, in the last general election, there was a study done where women were seen deviating from that of men in terms of choosing which party to vote to, right? So indicating some level of agency that lies with women as voters. In Iran, we saw, just in 2022, women led a whole political movement after following the um, death caused by supposedly moral policing, right? This inspired many other movements globally. And I am seeing 2023 as a year where this will increase political parties' focus towards women in politics, not just as voters, hopefully, party in their party positions too, as political party representatives. And if we see last 2 to 3 years trends, especially about, like, on what played out during the pandemic and after the pandemic, COVID has exemplified women's leadership to a different one, right? They are described as kind leadership, inclusive leadership. Women leaders played a role as great community mobilizers. This continued with several instances in 2022 as well. Very recently, just last month, Jacinda of New Zealand emphasizing the importance of having humane and kindness aspects to political leadership. Finland Prime Minister last year, there was a lot of controversy around her taking part in a cocktail party. She made a statement affirming that it's her private life as a human. Political leaders are humans, right? So I see that this new style of leadership, which is also coming from women leaders themselves, hopefully inspires many women in 2023 to take a plunge into political spaces. Um, there have been some instances of institutional changes being made by several countries. For example, just recently in 2022, Italy's parliament allowed women MPs to breastfeed babies in the chambers during parliamentary debates and sessions, right? Earlier, it was not the case. So, more parliaments can get inspired from such measures in 2023, creating more inclusive spaces for women. In India, we have seen a very important woman leader taking a stance against male leader from her own party because he had made sexist comments against women of another party, right? We have seen similar situations played out in Sri Lanka as well. Women coming together beyond party lines, asserting their influence as a unit in their national parliaments or political spaces, rather than muted actors or just those representatives who follow their male heads of the political parties. So I think these are the positive developments which will further inspire um, action towards gender equality in political spaces in 2023. Also, many firsts came across in 2022, which is again inspiring for 2023 and beyond. Some countries got first women head of the states. In India, we got someone from the tribal community, from the indigenous community, to become the first woman from the community to become the president of India. So it inspires women and men as well to rise up the ranks, to aspire politics as career choices. I hope to see 2023 as that year which inspires many to become part of political movements, electoral politics, drive change, and build more gender inclusive and diverse society at large.
Wow, thank you so much, Akhil. So part of your submission earlier on that really piqued my attention is the similarity that exists in terms of like the percentage of voters, women
Mhm.
voters in India, and versus what turns out at the polling units, and what is also obtainable in Nigeria as well. And I think this is also something that is, common in other parts of the world, particularly countries that are struggling to achieve parity or to meet the benchmark of 35% representation from, the Benjamin Declaration in 1995. In Nigeria, we are having a national election this year, February
Mhm.
precisely this month. So come February 26, 25, if I'm not mistaken, we'll be having our national elections. And so far, the trend about women as voters is also the same. I'm going to give you some very shocking and alarming figures that we have as at now. So currently we have 1.2 million registered voters for the election from February 20, 26, 27. We're going to be having like about 12.2 million voters. And out of this 12.2 million voters, we have 6.2 million of them as women. But the irony of this is that at the end of the day, judging from subsequent election results, we have fewer percentage of women elected into political offices, and so it gives us the it continually comes to mind that where is this problem coming from, and then we cannot overemphasize like the orientation that people have about women as leaders. Even women themselves, some women themselves do not believe that other women could represent them well, because the patriarchal society have obviously made this like almost like what's supposed to be, which is like totally the wrong ordeal of the day. So I'm optimistic, anyways. So far, the trend with Nigeria, I think we're taking this conversation down to the case study of the Nigerian contest and now to Indian contest as well. And let's see what the similarities that plays out. So currently we have like less than 10% of the um, total contestants. I mean, those that are vying for the election that are going to be contesting come February, this February, February is here already. We have just less than 10% of them as women. So the issue is at the end of the election, how many percentage of these women would eventually get into political offices? So it's quite disheartening that the data that we have, I mean, from our last general election, which is in 2019, showed more women contestants than 2023. So it's obviously tending towards that we're going to have lesser women representation this year compared to what we have 4 years ago. And going by the obvious fact that we're still struggling to, even get to the 20% representation, and now we're going backward to less than the 7.5 representation is alarming. And one of my recommendations, like in a lot of my submission towards solution to Nigeria, is adopting the quota system, but I find it difficult to accept that a lot of policymakers are not interested in going that route, and it's quite alarming to me. So it's interesting to know that this is almost like the same case scenario with what is happening in India, and this is like countries with like big population size around the world. So it's just what it is. So do you want to share like little context to what some other like limitations are or challenges are regarding women leadership in India?
Yeah. So I think, like from what you just described, even with the case of Nigeria, right? While quotas have helped clearly in India's local governance case, the country is not decided yet on implementing the same or similar kind of quota system at a parliament level or at a state legislature level. So it has been a fight for more than 2 decades now in India by range of stakeholders to get the quota bill to pass through in its parliament, right? But apart from quotas, which generally garner a lot of attention when it comes to discourses around women in politics globally, I'd also like to highlight three things specifically, which could be relevant to Nigeria as well, which are definitely relevant to India. So, the first thing being the role of political parties. We are, at least India is like very heavily political party driven society, political party driven democracy. So, elections are run heavily on agendas set by dominant political parties, right? So there is a clear need to create safe spaces or conducive spaces for women to work with political parties. So the intra political party democracy is something uh, that many political parties in India needs to improve on. There are, of course, positive examples which have played out in the last 5 years. Couple of political parties which hold a lot of influence in India adopted quota system, which is not mandated by election commission or parliament, but they proactively adopted this quota system to distribute 33% from one party, 40% from another party, party tickets to women to contest elections in parliamentary elections in India. So while these are very positive steps, it is important to also push this further and look at women's leadership not just by distribution of tickets, but have more women at political party leadership positions. You have women into core committees within the political parties, which can further inspire or bring up the cadre of those political parties across ranks to work closely with the parties and grow their political careers. I see that is one of the most important challenges that we need to address. Second, as an extension to talking about political parties, it's also important that we see politics as a workspace on par with, like any corporate company being seen as a workspace, and laws such as prevention of sexual harassment laws applied to those workspaces. Right, in India we have done an analysis on this, which will come out as a report very soon, probably next month. But in India, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act only applies to, corporate companies, government offices, and any other informal workspaces, but it does not apply to political parties when we look at parties as workspaces. So it really such acts need to be reviewed thoroughly from time to time. Look at political spaces as workspaces, politics as career choice, and only then we will have more people, more women especially, aspiring to become political leaders. The final thing I wanted to highlight is also about the role that civil society and media can play along with government, in collaboration with government, to bring about change. If you look at media, right, the way women leaders work is talked about is not very encouraging at all. So those are initiatives that, as civil society, as media, one can initiate and nudge governments to bring this larger change that we aspire to work towards.
Absolutely, Akhil. I agree with you 100% on that. Even with the recent happening with the New Zealand, you saw how the media,
Yeah.
put up sexist statements regarding a resignation. Perhaps, that's not the case with men who resign from political offices. Even we have men who, until date, are holding on to power when they know that they can't even go further. I mean, with the state of the economy, with the state of infrastructures, with the state of everything that needs to be in place, it's in shambles, but yet they are holding tight onto power. And then you have a woman who understands the importance of, leadership, what leadership is, and giving other people, opportunity to also, continue the leadership role. I mean, I saw that as a bravery. I saw that as what leaders should do, and what the media at the end of the day turned out to, say about a resignation is not, something like it that is, you know, um, acceptable. So I agree with you on the importance of the media and the CSO, civil society organization, in ensuring that, we forge for women equal representation as leaders in 2023 and beyond. I also, on seeing politics like as workspaces as well, as much as the trend around having equality in the workspace. A lot of companies these days are looking for diversity when they're hiring. They always have percentage of nationals, of like gender representations that needs to be part of their team. And so if we're looking at it as if we're looking at politics as such, then I think we'll be moving forward, in terms of leadership representation in 2023 and beyond. So, I mean, call to actions from here. I mean, this is where we're almost at the end of the conversation. It's been a very exciting one, an interesting one from you, Akil. So, what do you think? I mean, aside from all of this that you have mentioned, if you're looking at region basis, continent basis, what do you think? Countries should be doing right now in terms of like leaping forward for more women representation in 2023 and beyond. And what would you say to Nigeria? I mean, we have election coming in February 26th. What would you say to Nigerians that are watching us right now? Who are going to be participating in that global in that general election.
Um, yeah, so I think like not just Nigeria, but all of us as society can initiate actions around few things, which I would like to emphasize on. The first and foremost thing being building narratives on leadership, right? Put more emphasis on leadership. Even in Nigeria's case now, we're talking about elections where in 2023 we are seeing lesser number of candidates than that we have seen in 2019. So like even those who are standing for elections right now, contesting elections right now, we need to look at them as leaders, creating like focusing, highlighting their work as political leaders. Right, there is often very disproportionate emphasis on challenges, discussing challenges around why there are very few candidates. But while acknowledging those challenges, we it is also important to talk about how some leaders who are contesting now in this month have overcome those challenges and have reached this point and emerged as leaders, right? So that positive discourse on leadership is something I would like to call upon like all of us to work towards. Second, seeking men's allyship, right? Looking at men's work as allies in political spaces. What can what what can enable men's allyship? What can create opportunities for men's allyship? I think that's also very important to look at. Specifically, if I have to talk about political parties and women, existing women leaders, I think building solidarity among political actors beyond political party lines can bring a lot of change within a country's system. I would also like to emphasize that the importance of research on gender and politics. We have seen a lot of research happening in the US, in the Europe, UK, and Australia, but research at the intersection of gender and electoral politics in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa is very less. So we need to fund more research, create more evidence, understand more nuances, contextual and grounded nuances instead of borrowing what worked in say US, right? Creating more evidence around local context, which can further help civil society organizations, researchers like you and me, media, and a lot of other actors who are actively working towards improving gender equality in political spaces.
Yeah, very interesting points. I mean, you have Akil, and yeah, I'm excited to hear all of this because I can see the positive results that if these points that you are highlighted are are implemented, from the research aspect of it, what works, what is not working, and then implementing what is workable in all of these regions and places that you've mentioned, in Asia, in Africa, in other parts of the world. I mean, it's a good way to go. And you also talk about, building the narrative for leadership, making, these contestants that are women, making them um, known to the electorate as, potential leaders and not just women. I think if we change the narrative as women first before being leaders, would help a lot to, increase women's representation, because I see that a lot that has to do with not wanting to vote women into offices are perceptions about gender stereotypes that obviously interfere with our decisions, to choose potential leaders. I think if all of these things are put into place, we are seeing positive results for women leadership in 2023 and beyond. So I hope that everyone who is watching or would be watching later have gotten quite a lot of information from this conversation. Thank you so much, Akil. I'm not sure we have any questions. I don't think so. But if there are any questions that pops up in the comment section, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, we'll definitely push them across to Akil, who would answer them, and then would have them sent to the persons who asked the question. So on this note, I'm going to thank Akil for joining me today to have this conversation on women leadership in 2023. I'm optimistic that we'll make that leap forward for increasing women representation across board. Okay, Akil, do you have any final thoughts before we call this a day and we close the curtain for the conversation?
I am very optimistic as well, just as you. I hope to see we take more steps forward towards gender inclusive politics in South Asia and across the globe. Thank you for having me again. It's my pleasure interacting with you and the larger audience out there. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. And kudos with your work at the Center for Gender and Politics in India. Thank you for being the think tank that is necessarily needed for is it Southeast Asia or South, yeah,
South Asia.
South Asia. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.